Salacious Crumb, the Kowakian monkey lizard, served as Jabba the Hutt's pet and court jester, and has long been thought of as an indispensable part of Jabba's palace. There's actually been a surprising number of Salacious Crumb collectibles over the years, but in most cases, he's just been an accessory to another character, whether it was Jabba, Leia, C-3PO, or someone else. That's why today I'd like to list up the top 10 collectibles entirely devoted to Salacious Crumb. Our first entry is this Salacious Crumb PEZ Dispenser by Funko. It was one of 3 Jabba's Palace-themed PEZ dispensers that were sold separately as exclusives at Star Wars Celebration Chicago in 2019. But they were also available at GameStop stores. Funko did base the heads of these PEZ dispensers on the heads from the popular Pop figures, but the Salacious Crumb Pop figure was only available as part of a set with Jabba the Hutt, and in any case, there are some differences as you can see here. The PEZ dispenser is slightly bigger and has slightly different sculpting. This is also the only way you can enjoy delicious candy from the neck of Salacious Crumb. Our next entry is this talking Salacious Crumb plush from Underground Toys. It's pretty cute, and it's a nice size, and it's also made of some nice soft material. But as you may have guessed from the name, its biggest selling point is probably the fact that it makes noise. It says that it uses the original movie sounds, although if I'm honest, I don't really remember him making all of these noises in the film. For San Diego Comic-Con 2011, Hasbro released this giant Revenge of the Jedi Death Star set that included no less than 14 carded Star Wars figures. 12 of the 14 figures actually saw retail releases later on, but Salacious and the Mouse Droid were exclusive to this set, making them highly sought after by collectors who wanted to have complete collections of Hasbro Star Wars figures. And while it's true that this was only available in a set, and you couldn't buy it individually, this is the only example of a Salacious Crumb action figure that's carded on its own like this. Salacious and the Mouse Droid were both released on mini cards like this, but they're otherwise identical in style to the Vintage Collection figures. I think the front of the card looks great, but on the back we have more or less the same thing that's on all of the cards in this set, except for, of course, the picture of Salacious Crumb there on the left. The figure itself is just a repack of a figure that they've released a couple of times over the years. I believe it first appeared in 2007 in this C-3PO and Salacious Crumb 2-pack, and then it was later included in the Walmart exclusive Jabba's Throne set, which was released in 2010. Since most of the appeal of this figure is that it's carded, I won't open it up, but here's one of the other figures, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. They did apparently change the number on the bottom of the figure, though, so that you can tell them apart even if you have it out of the card. Our next entry is the Salacious Crumb Tick-Tock Clock. This is, of course, a Salacious Crumb version of the famous Felix the Cat Clock, and it was released in 2015 as a Celebration Anaheim exclusive. It operates on one AA battery and lives up to its name by making a rather prominent ticking noise. And of course the tail also wags in time with the ticking. Personally, I have this displayed with the battery removed most of the time just because of the little bit of noise it does make, but I think it looks great on the wall. Our next entry is the Salacious Crumb mini bust from Gentle Giant. Although there have been many statues of Salacious Crumb produced over the years, even just by Gentle Giant, there haven't been very many that weren't accessories for other statues. This was produced in 2005 as part of Gentle Giant's very popular line of mini busts, and of course it shows Salacious holding C-3PO's head, which didn't actually happen in the film, but we'll forgive that. You can see on the bottom that it is limited to 2,500 pieces, and also that there's a space for some little cell batteries to go in there. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those available at the moment, so I'm going to have to show you a video I took on a potato several years ago, and it just makes C-3PO's eye blink a little bit. It's really not that impressive of an effect. I would say the sculpt overall is quite good, although the paint may not quite hold up to today's standards if you look at it closely. Gentle Giant also released a special version of this that was a special holiday edition, available only to Collectors Guild members. It was limited to 200 pieces, and it added a Santa hat, some Christmas lights, and some other holiday-themed coloring. I don't have one of these myself, so these are the pictures from rebelscum.com. Next up, we have this stuffed latex Salacious Crumb figure that was sold at Disney Star Wars Weekends in 2013. This could certainly be used as a full-sized replica, although in reality it is a bit on the small side. It has a wire armature inside, allowing for some limited posability. He comes with his own pillow that has a little slot for his tail to fit in, which helps keep him in place, at least in theory. The sculpt is really quite good, and he's got a lot of artificial fur, which definitely helps make it look more realistic. He's constructed of a latex skin that's placed over some stuffing, and while I was a bit concerned about the possibility of the latex breaking down over time, so far he seems just fine. If you look on the bottom of the pillow, you can see that this was released in 2013 for the 30th anniversary of Return of the Jedi, and that it was a limited edition release of 1,983 pieces. Clever. I should note, though, that my figure has been very slightly repainted. When I got it, the mouth area here was not very well defined, so I just took a little black paint and kind of emphasized the mouth area a bit so you could see it better, and I think it made a big difference, actually. Next, we have this poster by Reese Cooper. This was released by Mondo, or the Alamo Drafthouse, in 2010, and it was part of a very successful line of Star Wars-related posters from various artists that Mondo released at the time. This poster is quite large and imposing at 3 feet by 2 feet, and of course it shows the scene from Return of the Jedi where Salacious is biting out C-3PO's eye. It was limited to 325 pieces. I know I said earlier that there weren't any other carded Salacious Crumb figures, and I still think that's true from a certain point of view, since these jumbo vintage figures from Gentle Giant are really more like art pieces that reimagine vintage Kenner figures at a much larger size. Of course, they never released a Salacious Crumb on a card like this in the vintage line, so they created this particular one as a Premier Guild reward in 2015. Originally, the idea was that this would just be the holiday version, and that they would be releasing a regular version of Salacious along with a jumbo Jabba figure. But nearly 5 years have passed since they originally made that announcement, so my hopes aren't high that they'll actually ever release it. One nice thing about the jumbo figures is that you can remove them from their cases without actually damaging it, and you can take these large cardboard backers out and even frame them if you want. The figure itself does come with holiday attire, as you can see here, and it has an articulated tail, just like the original figure did. In fact, if we take a look at the two figures side by side, you can see how close they are. They are made of slightly different materials, though. The original figure was very rubbery, while this is hard plastic. He also comes with a sack of presents. So if we take a look at what we get, the first item is a chrome C-3PO head. Very shiny. Then we get a couple of empty boxes for Gentle Giant mini busts. And finally, we have my personal favorite, a version of the original vintage Kenner Jabba the Hutt playset. And this one actually is not empty, or at least it wasn't when I received it, because you get a tiny little Jabba figure inside, which I think is worth the price of admission right there. Autographs was a company that specialized in Star Wars autographs, and one of the services they had was taking photos to various celebrities to collect their signatures. This particular piece was part of their so-called connoisseur series, where they would collect signatures from people who were related to a particular character, in this case, Salacious Crumb. So we have the signatures of Tony McVeigh, who sculpted the original Salacious Crumb puppet, Tim Rose, who was the puppeteer of Salacious Crumb, and finally Mark Dodson, who was the voice of Salacious Crumb. I should mention here, though, that Autographs ended up literally stealing a lot of people's money in the end when they failed to deliver autographs to their customers. I, in fact, was one of the backers of their Jabba the Hutt Connoisseur Series piece that started more than 10 years ago. But the people in charge eventually stopped communicating, and everyone involved ended up losing hundreds of dollars apiece. It's especially frustrating because the actual autograph pieces are finished, apparently, but they just were never delivered. Thanks for nothing, Autographs! Before we look at number 1, I have one honorable mention, and that is the Kowakian monkey lizard puppet that can be found at Disney's Galaxy's Edge parks. This comes in one version that looks like Salacious Crumb and another one that is more close to what we saw in the Clone Wars cartoon. The idea is that it would sit on your shoulder and you could use a little controller in your hand to kind of manipulate it. I'm making this an honorable mention for a couple of reasons. One is that this is not actually a Salacious Crumb collectible. It's a Kowakian monkey lizard collectible, but that's just a technicality. The main reason is that I don't actually have one of these at the moment. I have had it on my want list for quite a while, but I haven't gotten around to getting one, and it's a little difficult to get one at the moment with the parks being closed. And coming in at number 1, we have the Sideshow Collectibles life-size Salacious Crumb figure. This was released in 2008 for around $350 and is made of polystone resin and fiberglass. So it's not a puppet, it's really just a statue. To give you an idea of the scale, here he is next to a vintage Jabba figure. I think he might be a little bit under scale compared to the actual puppet from Return of the Jedi, but either way, he's very impressive in person. He sits on an actual cloth pillow, which is on top of a hard and heavy base, and there's a metal rod that goes up from the base into Salacious's body, so he sits on there quite firmly. One interesting fact about this piece is that it was actually sculpted by Tony McVeigh, who sculpted the original Salacious Crumb puppet from Return of the Jedi, so I think this is about as close as you can get to a truly authentic Salacious Crumb statue. I suppose my only real complaint about this figure is that it has a tail that sticks out quite far behind it, as you can see here, and while that's appropriate for the character, it makes it very difficult to fit it on any kind of shelf. Luckily, the tail is in fact removable. It has a metal rod that slides into his bottom there, and you can just pull it right out. I take the tail and just sort of drape it over the body when I have it displayed on a shelf in my office, as you can see here. And I think it looks just fine this way. Otherwise, I'd have to have some sort of dedicated pedestal for him to be displayed on, and I just don't have the room for that. By the way, next to him, I keep a C-3PO head that I've customized myself using a Sideshow Collectibles life-size C-3PO head that was defective. So, what did you think of my list of my top 10 Salacious Crumb collectibles? I'm interested to see if anyone else has things that they would have included instead, or maybe a different ordering that they would use. This is obviously somewhat arbitrary. And of course, for this particular list, we left out anything that was an accessory, so there's quite a few Salacious Crumb collectibles that we have not covered, and we have to come back and revisit this later on in the future. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching.